From here to the stars, I am your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. Our guest today is David Giere. He has a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan and was responsible for staffing propulsion engineers for the Orion Crew Exploration Vehicle program for Lockheed Martin and was functional director of 700 design and analysis engineers. Thank you, David, for taking the time for this interview.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
You published a paper entitled Titan II Small Multi-Satellite Mission Approach. Your co-authors included Aubrey Butts, Bruce French, and John Kusnierek. This was published for the 1989 Small Satellite Conference. In that paper, you and your co-authors made the case for launching multiple small satellites on one Titan II launch vehicle. Nowadays, launching multiple satellites on one launch vehicle is done all the time. But based on the wording in that paper, it sounds as though it was a completely new idea, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it sounded as though you were getting some amount of pushback. Is this true?
There wasn't a big market for small satellites at that point. Technology has gone on so far that, like you say, small satellites are kind of the way to do business nowadays, but we had a hard time finding a market for that, actually.
Okay. The paper specified that multiple satellites could be launched and they could be placed into different orbits. How would that be achieved?
You'd go into a parking orbit, an initial parking orbit in low Earth orbit, and release one satellite, and then burn the thrusters to adjust the orbit and release another satellite or two, and so on.
How long after the paper was presented did it take for the first multi-satellite mission to be launched?
We never did launch a multi-satellite launch. Like I said, we had a hard time finding a market for it.
Okay. You were a functional director of 700 design and analysis engineers. What is a functional director?
Our company had a matrix organization. Employees had essentially two chains of authority. For day-to-day work, they reported to their project. For new assignments, career growth, that kind of thing, they reported to the functional department, the home department. And so in that job, I was the home department. And at other times, I was on project and was supported by somebody in the home departments.
Okay. How do companies choose engineers versus how should they choose them? And is there a difference?
Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We had changed our approach over the years. Before I started working there, I understand that there was a very small number of universities that they chose engineers from, MIT, etc. I think getting engineers from Michigan was new, and that's, like you had said, that's where I went. And I'm glad they expanded their horizons. At one point, I did interviewing at the University of Wyoming for my boss, and we had expanded our horizon to Wyoming, and we got some incredible engineers there. I think what we realized was there are a lot of smart people out there. What really counts is your attitude and your work ethic. And you can pretty much tell that, I think, from an interview. So I'm glad we depended less on school identity and more on the interview. It interests me. I had a hard time in college. I didn't have great grades in my undergrad work, and it was my fault. But I did get through, and I ended up with less than a 3-point average. And there's been a push to increase the requirement for hiring to like a 3.5 or better. Mm-hmm. And I remember having lunch with one of the vice presidents of our company and noting that, laughing about the fact that if that had been a rule in the time we were hired, we wouldn't have been with the company. So I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't think that's essential. Like I
Mhm.
said, attitude is everything.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever watched a rocket launch in person?
Yes, many, many times at both Vandenberg Air Force Base and Cape Canaveral.
Mhm.
When I first started working, we were launching one Titan 3B for the Air Force about once a month out of
Mhm.
Vandenberg.
Mhm.
And I went to most of those launches.
Have you ever seen a launch fail?
Yes, I have.
Is it
And that's a
heartbreaking?
bad feeling. Pardon?
I would think so.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
our launch success rate was around 96%. So
Hmm.
about one in every 25 failed.
Hmm.
So it
Okay.
wasn't unusual to see a failure.
When a rocket launch fails, I'm sure there's a lot of research they go into. Can you describe some of the steps they follow in finding out where it failed, what caused the failure?
Sure. Um, First of all, the vehicle is loaded with lots of telemetry, and that's the first thing you look at.
Mhm.
Um, Also, there are cameras taking video, or in those days, film of the launch, and that can be very, very important. For example, one of the failures we had was a launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, and the film showed a plume of flame coming out of the strap-on solid rocket motor.
Hmm.
Pretty obvious that that was the cause of the failure. The question then was exactly where it is. And using information from the telemetry system, we looked at a lot of different things like the vehicle steering in response to that force, also the shock. There were accelerometers all over the vehicle, and by looking at when they responded to the shock as a function of time, we could pretty much isolate it to us. It ended up being about a 6, 8 inch diameter circle on the rocket.
Hmm.
And even though it was miles and miles away, and it turned out that indeed was the cause of the failure.
Have you ever worried excessively about one mission that might fail to launch, but then it did just fine? Or did you worry about them
Uh,
all?
oh yeah, I think you do. But um, we the Titan II was developed as a intercontinental ballistic missile initially, and then it was modified for the Gemini missions. The missiles were placed in silos, 54 silos around the country, and then they were deactivated in the early 1990s,
Mhm.
and they were put in storage in the desert down in Arizona. And we got a contract to refurbish 14 of those and turn them into launch vehicles for launching satellites one at a time in this case. And I was the chief engineer for that program. And I had, like I said, I'd been at a lot of launches. I'd watched my bosses and always wondered, gee, what are they feeling right now when they're seeing the vehicle go up? And the night of our first launch, uh, one of the guys who started the program with me and I were standing outside the office building where the control center was and watched the vehicle lift off. And honestly, we shed a tear, and we're
Yeah.
thinking, my gosh, is this thing really going to work? And it headed south from Vandenberg over the South Pole, and we lost all telemetry for a while because there are no ground stations down there.
Oh yeah, right.
And then it came up north over the South Pacific, and the Indian Ocean Station acquired it right in the middle of the beam. It was perfect,
Hmm.
and it was really, truly a palpable relief. It was just incredible to feel. You
Yeah.
know, it was
It
great.
sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Did you ever witness any historical event as it unfolded? Could be space related or maybe not.
In person, I was on the team that reviewed launch processing of the Titan 3Es that were used to launch the Viking landers and the Voyager spacecraft and the Helios spacecraft. So, and then I got to stay for the launch. So I watched that process. And then, of course, uh, gosh, my first year, I watched the moon landing,
Mm,
which was incredible. And I remember Apollo 8 coming around the backside of the moon and Frank Borman saying, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So, yeah, I've kind of seen the beginning and end of missions. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I was 14 when they landed on the moon. I was glued to the TV. It was super exciting.
it
Uh,
was.
yeah. When you were first getting started in your career, was there someone maybe who helped you or mentored you or gave you good advice?
My first boss was a guy named Don Dowell, and he was my group engineer. I started off in the propulsion and analysis unit, and our job was using computers to simulate the performance of the Titan propulsion systems. And he was my boss, and he was very open to if you had any new ideas or anything, you could take a couple of weeks and toy around with it and see if you could make an improvement. And there was a lot of that. We were still really at the beginning of high frequency launches, and so there was a lot of room for improvement. But he was very positive about allowing us to try things. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it sounds cool. Have you ever met one of your heroes?
Yeah. It was in the classified world, so I can't go into a lot of details, but
Okay.
there's a guy named Virgil Young who was chief engineer for a classified program. And years later, I ended up working for him. He came out of retirement to work on a proposal, and I worked for him. He's just a super decent guy, great team builder, brilliant man.
Hmm.
But it was a real honor to get to work for Verge.
Okay, okay. Um, have you ever met someone who maybe they weren't one of your own personal heroes, but today we look back at them as a bit of a legend in the history of space science or space exploration, and you had a chance to meet them?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time remembering his name now. It's one of the astronauts.
Hmm.
Met a couple of the astronauts. Bruce McCandless was the first guy to go out of the shuttle with essentially a motorized backpack and to
Hmm.
be not on a tether to free
Oh,
fly in space. And you've probably seen pictures of him kind of at an angle
yeah,
like this, about half a block away from the space shuttle. He came to work for our company,
yeah, I've seen
and I've
those
met
pictures.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
fun.
How does a project grow from an idea in only one person's head into a full-blown rocket sitting on the pad ready for launch? What are the steps? Or are there too many to describe?
No, no, the Titan 2 that I talked about was a great example of that. That started off as an idea of a customer, um, Colonel Vic Whitehead, and the guy who was my boss, Jim Grecian, on Titan 2. And the two of those guys got the idea that we could refurbish these old ICBMs, which were at that point 25 years old and had been in the desert for 7 or 8 years. So it started off with one person, and then Jim hired me and brought me and another guy onto the program, and we kind of fleshed out the idea and submitted a proposal. And so it started off with three people, and after we won the contract, it pretty quickly grew to a couple hundred people in Denver and also people at the launch site to modify the pad. But it kind of exploded really fast. Well, it turned
Hmm.
out to be a very successful program.
Mm-hmm. In the early days of rocket engine development, what was the biggest hurdle to be overcome?
I wasn't around for any of that. I really don't know. We just treated them as something that was available and could be used.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I'm aware of that's close is when I was in graduate school, I was a research assistant at the propulsion lab at Michigan, and we had a contract from NASA to study detonations in two-phase media. What that means is it was liquid droplets of fuel in a gaseous oxygen environment. And the reason they were interested in that was they were having combustion instability in engines.
Hmm.
And it was a detonation wave would ignite and would go in circles around the combustion chamber. And actually, the temperatures were high enough it could cut off the end of the engine.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so it was great research to be doing. It was fantastically interesting, but turns out it was easily solved. They just put in five, I don't know what you'd call them, like plates that would break and a star of five with 5 points on it. And when the detonation wanted to get going, it would run into this
Mhm.
blank wall and stop. So it
Ah,
was easily solved, but it provided 2 years of engineering of research for us. It was really exciting.
yeah, yeah. Um, Solid versus liquid propulsion. Each one has advantages over the others. What are the pros and cons of each? Or did you ever work with solid rocket engines?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
like I mentioned, that one failure was one of the solid
Oh
rocket
yeah.
motors.
Mhm.
Um, when a rocket's going into space, uh, lifting off, it's fighting gravity. The most important thing is thrust at that point. Engine efficiency is kind of a secondary thing. So you want to get out of there fast, get out of the gravitational field, and bend over, going horizontal, parallel to the Earth's orbit fast. Solid rocket motors are great for that.
Mhm.
They really push hard, and then you jettison them. They they have relatively low efficiency, but then you jettison those and you start up the liquid engines, which have higher efficiency. We called it specific impulse. Um, and what's important then is only efficiency because you're not fighting gravity. You're just trying to accelerate and go into different orbits. So yeah, there's a place for both liquid and solid propellants.
Let's talk about the gimbaled mounts on rocket engines. When I was a teenager, I built and flew a model of the Mercury Redstone rocket. Of course, my little model didn't, but if I remember correctly, the original full-size version of that rocket used 4 vanes made of graphite to steer the exhaust by steer the rocket by deflecting the exhaust after it left the engine. The vanes produce friction, of course, which reduced the efficiency of the rocket engine. Still, it seems a much simpler method than gimbaling the entire engine with its pipes and pumps and cooling systems. Is efficiency the only reason why gimbaling the engines has dominated throughout rocketry ever since?
I never participated in that trade study, so I'm guessing why the vanes uh, didn't survive as a way of controlling the engines. I'm
Mhm.
assuming that the environment they were in was, horrendous. It's, high speed, hot stuff. The gimbals are in the same environment. I mean, not the gimbals, but I mean the controls for the vanes would be in the same environment. So I would assume there's a real reliability problem with those. You're right. When you gimbal an engine, you've got to have the propellant lines and everything associated with the engine moving also. So it is complex, but it's survived as the right way to steer a vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, Many rocket engine designs have the fuel to run through pipes wrapped around the outside of the rocket nozzle, using this as a way to preheat the fuel and to keep the nozzle itself, I guess, from melting. Just how much benefit is there in preheating the fuel to produce more efficiency?
Oh yeah, it makes it much easier to ignite. It's definitely a gain in efficiency. It's the right thing to do. You're
Hmm.
right.
Okay. Was it always done this way? And if not, what were the outcomes? That is, were the outcomes always good?
I don't know of any engines where they didn't do that.
Oh, okay.
I'm not
Okay.
aware of that.
Um, let's see. How were rockets guided before digital computers? Were there completely analog electronic systems of guidance?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
there were.
Did you work with some of those? Were they reliable?
Oh yeah, there was also radio guidance. The launches from Vandenberg Air Force early on did not have inertial guidance on board. They were radio guided, and radio and guidance signals were sent up to the vehicle as a result of processing the radar information that the ground station had. So yeah, and there's radio guidance, there's inertial guidance, and digital guidance, and of course, digital's by far the most effective.
Mm-hmm. Were there ever any mechanical guidance systems that used zero electronics?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, maybe Robert H. Goddard with his early rockets were using something like that. I don't know. Let's see. Elon Musk recently set a new world record for pressure in a rocket engine combustion chamber, 330 bar, which is 325.6 times atmospheric pressure. Does that number surprise you, or does it seem like just part of the natural progression of continuous engineering improvement over time?
Let's see, 325 times atmospheric.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Sorry, I think in terms of PSI.
Oh, okay. If you got a calculator, you can do the calculations there. It's a lot.
Hold on just one second.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed. It's a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, I'm impressed with Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
That's like 5,000 PSI. Yeah, that's pretty high pressure. Yeah.
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 And so it does surprise you.
It's a great thing to do. Nothing he does surprises me, honestly.
Oh, okay. I didn't write it in here, but one question I could ask is, he has recently broken the Russian record on a continuous series of unfailed rocket launches. With I believe he broke 200. The Russian record was, I think, 140 something launches without a failure. Yeah, he's amazing.
He is. He really is.
Mm-hmm.
United Launch Alliance and their Atlas vehicle have a long, unbroken string of successes also, but Elon Musk has done incredible things.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the Atlas program at the very beginning of it, and honestly, looking back, and we were coming up with the conceptual design of what it would look like. And I wish it had occurred to us, or somebody had said, hey, why don't we try recovering stage one and reflying it? Because at that point, we could have done it, but it never occurred to us.
Mm-hmm.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, I was the day I was super impressed was when I saw the video of two first stages landing side by side simultaneously. It's astounding.
Yeah.
I was impressed when one did it, but to two, it's just remarkable.
He's recovered a lot of his payload fairings as well.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what else he does. When I was a teen, I built a plastic non-flying model of the Saturn V. It stood over 3 feet tall and could be disassembled into all its various stages. One day I was reading in my dad's copy of Popular Science that the Apollo capsule was aerodynamically self-correcting during re-entry. Naturally, I wanted to test this for myself, so I pulled off the capsule, which was only about 1 inch in diameter, and threw it the 20 feet across the room onto my bed. I did this several times, trying out different starting angles. Sure enough, it really was aerodynamically stable. It corrected for the angles that I gave it and maintained the proper orientation. So my doubts were misplaced. Have you ever had doubts in a device or a system that were only calmed by actually seeing the thing in action, seeing that it actually worked?
Kind of the vice versa. When I was a research assistant, we tested, I wasn't involved in this, but the university tested a Volkswagen stability on a turntable, and to see if it was indeed stable and wanted to go forward all the time. And they found that the old Volkswagen Bug, after it passed, I think it was like 65 miles an hour, really wanted to go backwards. And that always fascinated me.
Does sound fascinating. This is a fishing question. Have you ever played Kerbal Space Program?
What is it?
Kerbal Space Program. It's a computer game that gives you the opportunity to build rockets and fly them, or try to.
No,
they can fail. Neat. Very often they fail.
No, last game I played was Frogger.
No. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Now I have some sort of fun questions. In the following list of movies and TV shows, what do you think they got right, and what do you think they got wrong about space travel, physics, engineering? Starting with Star Wars. I'm guessing you've seen Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. What stands out in that movie that you think they got right and wrong?
Well, the warp drive intrigues me. I would love to know, being an old propulsion guy, that intrigues me. I don't know if they got it right or wrong. I would love to know more about it. And gosh, if they got it right, wouldn't it be great if we had it now,
Yeah. Yeah. Star Trek, like Star Trek The Next Generation or the original series.
Mostly, I just like the people in that. I really enjoyed that for the people, not the technology.
Yeah, if a movie is really good, if it's well made, it's enjoyable, it sucks you in, and you don't even notice the hand waving.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I can't do that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll just cut all
great.
those. Yeah.
It amazes me how much of that seems to be coming true now. Hal is actually a real, could be a real thing.
Yeah, it's kind of spooky. I take it you've played around with some of this AI stuff.
Some, yeah. The last class I took in my master's program was a probability course, and everything else I had taken was propulsion and gas dynamics and orbital mechanics and stuff like that. But the probability and statistics class turned out to be what I probably used 90% of the time. And I didn't know at the time that I was taking it how important it would be. But processing data, which is a big deal. I have a son-in-law who works for Amazon, and handling data and learning from it is just incredibly powerful. And we found that too. The Air Force measured success in terms of standard deviations. You wanted to have 3 standard deviations assurance of success, 99.85, I think it is, probability of success. And so we really learned a lot by applying probability and statistics and data process, data analysis. We found all kinds of surprise correlations, things that we had no idea correlated with each other within the vehicle. And we learned an enormous amount out of that.
Okay. Well, excellent. David, I appreciate you taking the time for the interview. It was great stuff.
Yeah, it was a fun career.
Yeah. Well, I sure enjoyed this, but I better let you go.
Yeah, thank you. This was fun.
That was David Giere. This has been From Here to the Stars, a video series produced by the Interstellar Research Group. The IRG is a non-profit organization dedicated to thoroughly exploring the science and engineering that can eventually open up the reality of interstellar travel. Find out more about our next symposium at irg.space. I have been your host, Stephen Euin Cobb. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and you can subscribe to our channel for other such videos. On behalf of all of us here at the Interstellar Research Group, I thank you.